4.6 billion years ago, you wouldn't have survived on Earth for 1 second. Simple reason, Earth didn't exist yet, just dust and gas. Debris from exploded stars. Gravity pulled it together, layer by layer. That's how the first version of our planet was born. Space junk. Young Earth never got a break. About 4.5 billion years ago, a rock the size of Mars slammed into it. The impact blasted a cloud of debris into space. That debris would later become the moon. That was only the beginning. After the collision, Earth got its first ocean. Don't get excited. This wasn't an ocean of water. It was a soup of fire. Hundreds of kilometers deep, glowing red, lit up in the dark. The sky above it was black, with a red glow from lava and ash. Only heat. Only darkness, and constant hits from space debris. Your survival time here, 0 seconds. Then something else fell into that hell and it changed everything. Where the water came from is still a mystery. There are two theories. First, icy comets from the outer solar system kept slamming into young Earth, one after another. Second theory is bolder. The water had been hiding inside the planet the whole time, locked in the mantle. Molten rock melted. Water dissolved into the magma. The magma rose. Pressure dropped. Water burst out as steam from volcanoes, but the heat was too intense. Water evaporated straight back into space. This repeated for millions of years, until one day, the surface temperature dropped below boiling point. The lava started to cool. From fiery red to dark gray, cracked all over. Water started collecting in those cracks for the first time. That's how the first rain happened. It rained and rained. Basins filled with water. That's how Earth got its first real ocean. It wasn't blue. It was thick, swampy green, a dense chemical cocktail. Not alive yet, but already loaded with the right ingredients. The sky above it, pale orange from thick haze. How life began is also a mystery. And there are two theories here too. First, simple molecules, methane, ammonia, water, carbon dioxide, got zapped by lightning and turned into organic compounds. Second, the same thing happened, but not on the surface. Deep in the ocean, near scorching underwater vents, under crushing pressure. Either way, 3.5 billion years ago, the ocean was already full of primitive single-celled organisms. But for a human, this planet was still deadly. The ocean stayed green thanks to massive amounts of dissolved iron. There was barely any land, just a few magnesium islands poking out of the green. The air held 10 atmospheres of pressure. It would burst your lungs in a second. Your survival time on this planet, 4 seconds. Earth spun faster, days were shorter, and the moon hung much closer and looked much bigger than it does today. What happened next almost wiped out the whole planet. Bacteria in the ocean figured out photosynthesis, turning sunlight and water into food and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. Sounds like a revolution, right? But nothing changed for a billion years. The planet became a rust factory. Every bit of oxygen instantly bonded with the iron dissolved in the ocean, turning into rust. The rust dissolved, and the cycle started over. Then the iron in the ocean ran out. Oxygen had nowhere left to go. It started building up in the air. For life back then, that was pure poison. The first mass extinction in the planet's history began. At the same time, oxygen destroyed all the methane that had been keeping the planet warm, like a blanket. The blanket was gone, and Earth froze for hundreds of millions of years. The green ocean bleached out white. The sky turned clear and pale. The planet became a solid ball of ice. Eventually, the climate stabilized. Around 1.8 billion years ago, the boring billion began. For almost a billion years, the ocean was murky yellow and reeked of rotten eggs thanks to huge amounts of hydrogen sulfide in the water. You still couldn't breathe the air, but it wasn't quite as lethal. Upgrade, from 4 seconds of survival to a full minute. Real progress. The land was bare gray-brown rock and sand, without a single patch of green. The ocean got its first cells with a nucleus, ancestors of every future animal, plant, and fungus, along with the first reproduction. The planet was a kingdom of microbial slime. The boring billion ended in an ice execution, one of the harshest events in Earth's history. The planet froze solid, pole to pole. The sky turned blinding white. The ocean became solid ice, and temperatures dropped to 51 degrees. Volcanoes thawed the planet out. For tens of millions of years, they pumped greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. At some point, the effect got so strong it melted all the ice, even at the equator. In a short span of time, the planet flipped from an icy hell into a scorching one. The melting ice turned into one giant flood. The air turned hot and drenched in moisture, like the whole planet got locked in a sauna. First came gray-brown patches of bare rock, then rushing streams of meltwater. After that temperature swing, in just 1% of the planet's entire history, 20 major animal groups appeared all at once. The foundation of all life on Earth today. Animals got their first hard shells. The kings of the era were trilobites, armored arthropods, the first creatures with fully developed eyes. Picture something between a woodlouse and a crab, wrapped in a segmented shell like armor. Land stayed completely bare. All of life played out in shallow seas, tinted a blue-gray from all the activity teeming below. 470 million years ago, life stepped onto land for the first time. The first conquerors were liverworts, primitive plants with no roots, no leaves. Ocean algae had developed a waxy coating by then, one that stopped water from escaping. Animals followed 20 million years later, arthropods, ancestors of spiders with the very first lungs. We'll come back to them. Land finally turned green. Just thin lines along the water's edge, though. Everything else was still gray-brown, but at least you could breathe. Meanwhile, plants invented their own plumbing system, vascular tissue that could move nutrients through the whole stem. That kicked off a race for sunlight. Whoever grew faster got more light, more energy, and produced more spores, which meant spreading faster than everyone else. The race for height demanded tougher stems, strong enough to hold up their own weight. That's how the first tree bark appeared, and with it, the first real forest. Land turned deep, saturated green, no longer thin lines, but solid stretches of it. Meanwhile, predatory fish were taking over the water. To escape them, other species fled into shallow ponds and swamps, the kind that dried up on a regular basis. Fish either died there or crawled to the next puddle over. In some of them, fins started acting like support during those crawls, slowly starting to look more like limbs with fingers. That's how, 385 million years ago, Tiktaalik showed up, a transitional creature. The beginnings of a wrist and elbow tucked inside a fin, but still gills and scales like a fish. Not quite lizard, playing for both teams and never fully committing to either. While some animals were crawling out of the water, chaos of a totally different scale was unfolding in the sky. Meanwhile, on land and in the air, arthropods were feasting. The more oxygen in the atmosphere, the bigger an animal could grow. Out of nowhere came 6-foot millipedes and dragonflies the size of seagulls. The planet turned lush green from horizon to horizon, the sky a deep, saturated blue. The biggest extinction in Earth's history isn't the one that killed the dinosaurs. The one that killed the dinosaurs doesn't even crack the top 3. The one that actually came closest to wiping out all life on the planet is happening right now, underground in what's now Siberia. Volcanoes are waking up. The eruption lasted 300,000 years. The hardened lava covered an area roughly the size of the United States, in some spots a kilometer thick. The sky turned dark with ash and smoke. Carbon dioxide piled up in the atmosphere. The planet heated up fast, like a greenhouse. The heat drained oxygen from the ocean. Fish couldn't breathe. Mass die-offs began underwater. At the same time, acid rain was killing off plants and animals on land. Food chains collapsed. Plants died. Plant eaters had nothing left to eat. Predators had nothing left to hunt. Out of every 10 species alive at the time, only one survived. This was the single largest extinction event in the planet's entire history. The green planet went dull almost overnight. Ash gray and brown tones from volcanic soot buried all the green. The ocean lost its blue and turned murky, dark, nearly lifeless. 10 million years later, the planet started to recover. The ocean was still nearly empty. On land, one species basically had the place to itself, Lystrosaurus, a pig-like creature about the size of a dog. Not the strongest, not the smartest, just low maintenance. Sometimes the planet doesn't go to the winner. It goes to whoever's still standing. There was still just one continent, Pangaea, surrounded by a single massive ocean. That layout created a giant desert at its core, roughly half the size of all land on Earth. The sky above it, dusty yellow. A couple million years later, a new group of reptiles branched off, the archosaurs. Their leg posture changed, now straight underneath the body instead of sprawled out to the sides like typical lizards. That gave them speed and stamina. Archosaurs are exactly where dinosaurs come from. The first dinosaurs showed up not long after, small, two-legged hunters about the size of a turkey. They weren't in charge yet, though. Bigger rivals were still around, pseudosuchians, relatives of modern crocodiles. That same giant moon, by the way, is still hanging up there, just a little farther away now. You just went through Earth's history from molten rock to the first dinosaurs. And this is only the beginning. Next part coming soon. Subscribe.